Bruce Lyon, welcome. Thank you for having chat. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about sexual energy as life force energy and what happens when we start to work with this energy and how it can transform our lives.
Sure. Well, I certainly think sexual energy is life force. It's part of life force. And there's everything now from people working with it in better orgasms for enlightenment to using the sexual energy for developing consciousness, for healing, for all of those kinds of things. My own path was more of the traditional masculine spiritual path to go towards enlightenment through consciousness, through the soul, through deepening soul awareness, to then going into non-dual traditions and then going for the life force at the core of consciousness rather than matter. And in those traditions, mainly sexuality and the body are seen as the opposite direction. So you're supposed to be transcending the body and sexuality and going for the core of awareness. And of course, there is life force to be found at the core of awareness, there is a deep spiritual awakening to be had there. But then integrating that in with matter and getting past the spirit this way, matter that way, and really understanding that spirit is working through everything, including subtle vibrations, which we call spirituality, and the dense vibrations of the body, which we call matter. So for me, having spiritual awakening is great, but then how do you manifest that deeply in the world? Now you've got to come back to the body. You've got to come back to matter. You've got to really ground your awakening and awareness in the body. So coming back and exploring emotional energy and sexual energy and the energy of matter itself from a place of deep awareness. And I think that's the difficulty and the modern cry of like, sexuality is life force, we need to go there. The whole reason behind the left-hand path and the right-hand path was that if you go to the energy that's stored in matter before you've developed enough consciousness, then it can overwhelm you. So it's more of a regression than an awakening. However, that energy that's stored in our sexuality and matter is powerful fuel for the awakening process and is itself a divine energy. So the essence for me is do both works together. Develop consciousness, awaken to the core of what's in awareness, and work with your sexual energy and work with the kundalini and what's in matter as a way of bringing these two very powerful energies, which are both expressions of the life force, into harmony and empowering love. So some people take the path into matter first, and then normally it's so problematic for them that they then go develop consciousness. Other people develop the consciousness first and then take it in. And I think the future is going to be people able to start from a non-dual position where they're not preferencing the body or spirituality, that the spirituality is intimately linked with the body. So we won't have to go away somewhere and then come back. We'll just start with a deep appreciation that this and our erotic energy and our hearts and everything are part of a divine whole. And we need to understand them all and find ways to integrate and relate to them all.
So, speaking from a personal perspective, one of the challenges that I've found in this area is the relating patterns that we have in society, like this idea of monogamous partnership and that sort of thing. How do you have any sort of insights or thoughts on how to work within this container and where we're headed in terms of relating?
Yeah, well, that's the big question for many people on the planet now. Is like, how do I, if I free up my sexuality, if I integrate my sexuality in my heart and my soul, how do I engage others? Like, what is a healthy path to follow? And of course, the answer with love normally is that there isn't a path. that monogamy or polyamory or the latest paradigm or new lifestyle is another form of box. It might be a better box than the old box, but it's still a box. And love, when it really starts to be a living, active vibration in your being, doesn't really like boxes, which doesn't mean that there can't be deep containers. And my experience of relationship is that going deep with somebody is a very powerful journey that allows you to open up parts of yourself that just would not be safe to open if you did not have the container of relating. But also engaging others when there is a deep call of medicine for each other and gifts for each other to exchange is also a powerful way of relating. So I don't think there's a particular path to follow, and a lot of people are going through a lot of pain trying to conform to a new idea of how they should be in relationship, or look for a model outside of how should I be now, like what works between men and women, and between men and men, a woman and woman. What works is a way of deeply honoring that we have these soul journeys, and we have love, which is quite obviously capable of being shared with much more than one person, and we have our sexual energies which have elements of deep mating in them. Like, how do we do this? How do we make all of this work? And I think it's like it's a Zen koan for the modern relator, is how do I deeply follow love? And for me, the energies that work there inside each human being are, how do I own my desires? How do I acknowledge my fears? And how do I really feel what love wants? And that's not a paradigm. That's a living moment-to-moment process. For example, you could feel desire for somebody, but you have a deep love with somebody else. Is it worth risking that love to chase that desire? On the other hand, you may have a deep love for somebody and you have a fear that if they engage someone else, you might lose them. Is it worth blocking them because of your fear? So these are not questions that can be answered in books. These are questions that you live in your relationships, and each relationship is a holy book of the way love is trying to unfold in the world. So, I have deep compassion for anyone who's let go of paradigms and is in that journey themselves of what does love truly want, and what does it want now, and what does it want now, and what does it want now,
So another thing that I find interesting on this path is once we start exploring the inner masculine and feminine, and developing that relationship, and then you find a partner who also has an inner masculine and feminine, and putting the inner partnership first, and then trying to meet an outer couple. It gets quite complex. It's it's a foursome. Generally with two of the foursome having been repressed, one in each. Like in my case, my feminine has been quite repressed by my masculine, and in partnerships my tendency is to find a woman with a strong feminine, and then I can really tap into her feminine, and it's my way of repressing my own. So I don't know what you're going to be able to say here, but do you have any advice on sort of starting to work with these internal polarities and how to bring them to relationship? I mean, one experience I've had is, as you really build your own partnership, then there's this fear that maybe you don't need partnership anymore, and the personality steps in and says, really wants to control you there. Do you have any?
Yep, I know that journey quite well. But I suppose the first thing is that most relating on the planet is still very immature, and it's polarity driven. So men identify with men and women with woman, and they complete each other. But really in the last 50 years, that's moved into a deep understanding that the first marriage has to take place inside a human being, that given your masculine and feminine equal say in your own heart is the beginning of equality and the end of the gender wars, because once you truly listen to and create union between these principles inside yourself, then you're not so interested in polarity. And then people think, well, what will drive relationship now? It's like, if I'm whole in myself, what's the whole point of relating? but relating drops to a much deeper part that can still have the polarity, but now the souls are genuinely meeting. So prior to that, most relationships, even though they call themselves soulmates or whatever, it's a projection game of the masculine and feminine. And it's only really when you start to have that union that you truly see the other being as someone that you love, and that is a deep soul love beyond your polarity of sexual attraction. So then relating really begins, and also so do the troubles, because most of us have not fully completed our own union. So we're still using each other as projection screens, but now we're doing it consciously, and we're helping each other become more whole rather than taking care of the bits that the other person hasn't been able to integrate. So then relationship is actually more of a workshop on love rather than a place to feel safe and secure. In fact, a good partner is somebody who will not intentionally but inevitably trigger our deepest abandonment wounds and core, anything that's not love inside us. When love arrives outside of us is going to come up. So, modern relationships are not really for the faint-hearted, and we still haven't found the way yet. We're still discovering the way of how to do them.
Absolutely. It's a journey.
Yeah.
So do you have any advice for people who are really wanting to start on this journey? And there's so many different avenues you can take, and I guess each one's probably going to suit different people, but just general advice for people wanting to start exploring this area more deeply.
The area of relationships, the area of sexuality and spirituality.
Are they different?
I guess not. They are deeply, intimately linked to my own path. That's for sure.
I guess, whatever you feel like taking that question. I feel like there'll be people watching this who are really wanting to start this journey and probably wondering, where do I even start? There's so many different places you could go.
Well, I think the journey really starts with your own deep sense of inner guidance, and when you've stopped looking to outer forms of authority to give you maps or models or advice on what your path is, and you start looking for guides that are people that are able to resonate with where you are and support where you are. So the first thing I would say is don't listen to my advice, but the second thing is to listen to what is emergent for you, and to listen deeply to the soul whisper that's underneath the crash of desires and fears and so on. Listen to the soul whisper and trust that that love can guide you from the inside. But that's a great act of bravery, because you're stepping aside then from your reliance on outer authority, and you are risking that you are actually a fuck up, and that your deep inner soul whispers are coming from unintegrated parts of your psyche that you may not be able to trust. So most people would rather not take that risk, but I think when the risk becomes less than the risk of not opening your soul and not entering the world as love, then you're ready to make that journey. And then it becomes inevitable, really. It becomes a process that once set in motion, you can't unset, you can't unknow. It's like Santa Claus. Once you know Santa Claus is not there, then that's the end of something. Once you know that romantic relating is kind of doomed, it's beautiful, but it's doomed way of its old software on the planet, then you start to really inquire into love. And then love shifts from being this kind of very sentimental idea of emotional and sexual fidelity, and it's so immature, really, into what love really is, which is the most powerful force in the universe that will fuck you over if you try to control it, that will break you out of any box that you try to put it in, but will teach you, God, it will teach you what love is. So, I think maybe that it's probably, never mind spirituality and sexuality, I think relationship based on that union in each person is probably the most powerful spiritual part of them all.
Yeah, wow. I certainly know I've certainly started to experience the complexities of this area, and one of the things I've said to my partner. I mean, I'm in a relationship, and it's when we're sort of exploring where we're going with this, and I've said, like, when I look around, I don't have any role models. Like, I can't. There's no couple that I look to and I want to say I want to be like them, because actually, I feel like we're really trying to really break new ground here, and I've said that to my partner too. Do you realize what being in partnership with me is? That's where I want to go. I want to create something that doesn't exist, and I fully understand how ridiculously hard that is going to be. How much pain potentially is going to have to be gone through to even get there if we can. But I'm not interested in anymore in that. I've been through too many relationships and seen the patterns that play out in myself. And it's that, like you said, kind of, it's not even that I want to go there as much as I know that I don't have a choice anymore. So this is where I'm going, and my partner at the moment anyway is brave enough to accompany me on that path. But yeah, it also feels beautiful. As much as I can see how hard it is, I can see the beauty of it, and the layers that keep emerging as we peel back. Peel back one layer and there's a new layer to work through, but never ending, but beautiful.
Well, it's a brave journey that you're on, and she's a brave woman as well. I must say, in my life, this rose garden we're sitting in is where I got married 17 years ago to my current wife. And we dedicated that ceremony to really, truly, underneath all of the trades and manipulations and so on, what would it be to have love and freedom between a man and a woman, like between us? Like, how can we genuinely get to a place where we both love each other and have full freedom and trust? Like, that's the goal. 17 years later, we're still in that process. It's still a hot cauldron of creativity. Maybe 5 years in I would have said, yes, follow this way, this is the way. 10 years in I would have said, no, don't go some other way, this is not it. Now I feel like it's not about following a way, it's about two people dedicating themselves to love and to that journey towards love, more than to their self-interest and their own desires and needs for fulfillment and all of these things. I think a lot of what we use relationship for is something just more masturbation for the self, and really relationship is about surrendering the self and dying to yourself for the sake of love, and having that other person as a deep beloved that you are willing to prioritize over your personal needs at times for the sake of love. So it's been a wild ride, and I would say there's more to come. But I also think there's probably nowhere to get to, except that I would say the depth of love that I feel for those people that I have walked through the fires with is unshakable. And we experience that in our own work with the mystery school here, that when you have walked through the fire with someone, then you don't doubt that you're loved, and you don't doubt your capacity to love, even though you may still argue about what that looks like.